I would like to bring in another favorite guest of mine. I swear, I know I tell him every time he comes here. He's informed my workable point of view. Professor Richard Wolff. Professor Richard Wolff is Professor of Economics Emeritus at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and a visiting professor at the graduate program in International Affairs at the New School University in New York City. He is founder. Yeah, I guess I have to ask you about Mandani, New York. I forgot about the New York connection. He's founder of Democracy at Work and host of the nationally syndicated show Economic Update, a fantastic show, by the way. His latest book, The System is the Sickness When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself, is available with his other books, Understanding Socialism and Understanding Marxism, at democracyatwork.info. Professor, how you doing this morning? You doing okay?
I'm doing okay, Jamal, and I'm glad to be talking with you.
Well, thank you for this. Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill, Big Bertha, a grotesque, just profoundly astonishing naming of a bill, if ever one existed. But that bill is going to be utterly grotesque in regards to what it's going to do to SNAP benefits, what it's going to do to Medicare, what it's going to do to jobs, solar power, what it's going to do to jobs in healthcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they are running around acting as if, hey, this is going to cut taxes. It's going to be fantastic. Give me your take on this. And I want to piggyback that with this idea that there are no protests in the streets.
Well, I think you put the two things together that need to be put together, the most important part. Let me talk first about the bill and then talk about the streets. The best way to understand this bill is to understand it as act number 2 in a 2-act play that is the basic Trump presidency. In Act 1, his first 4 years, in December of 2017, he, controlling the Congress at that time the way he does now, got through a tax cut. And it was a tax cut that was bigger than most tax cuts have been. Everybody knows that and agrees to that. And it favored corporations and the rich, and everybody except a few people that no one takes seriously anymore understand that it did that. Now, what was most interesting about that tax cut is that it came at the end of a 40-year period, the 1980s, 90s, first and second, basically, decades of this century. 40 years during which every statistic economist study showed a redistribution of wealth in America from the bottom and the middle to the top. Everyone shows it. Oh, we disagree about the specific numbers, but no one seriously disputes that we had redistributed wealth in a way we had never seen before in America in that 40-year period. To say the same thing in simple English, never did corporations and the rich need a tax cut less than in that moment when they got it. And the only thing the limp and lame Democrats could do was to attach to that law a sunset, a date, namely December 31st, 2025, when the provisions of that tax cut would expire. So the business community cheered. They cheered as loud or louder than those people that your previous guest told us about the day that Nixon resigned. The people outside the White House cheering when the Mayflower moving truck arrived to take his stuff out of the bedroom or whatever they did. Well, not only did they cheer, but they did what you could expect them to do. They weren't horrified by Mr. Trump's white supremacy. They weren't horrified by his scapegoating immigrants. They brought him back for his second bow. They brought him back, and he had a number one task: perpetuate that tax cut from before and add a little extra tax cut for us on your second time. They brought him back, and over the last few weeks, he delivered on what he was sent to Washington to do. All the rest of it is political theater. Oh, it may have terrible results. It may be rehabilitating every kind of racism and jingoism. Horrible. I don't question that. But that's a sideshow, however much you and I may be horrified by it. The main show is the one we've just watched. The tax cut bill of 2017, which we didn't need and shouldn't have done then, has now been continued rather than letting it expire at the end of this year, which is what should have happened. That's what he did. That the big beautiful, that's all theater. It's a simple job he was sent there to do. He's done it. And the people who run this country, the big bankers, the big hedge fund operators, the leaders of Amazon and Google and all of that, they don't care what he does the next 2.5, 3 years. Who cares? He's done, just like they didn't care what he did in 2018, 2019. For them, his presidency is over. The rest, he can do whatever he wants because they don't care. If he goes too far for them, they'll slap him on the wrist and he'll back off. By the way, that's what's happening to many of the tariffs. He did a big show. He's the big tough guy in the world. He's telling everybody what else to do. It doesn't work. And so he backs off. But the people who run it, they don't care. They don't care whether he does it. They don't care whether he succeeds a lot, a little, not at all. They've got their job done and they're happy. And they're starting to look now. This is Mr. Trump's biggest problem. Now that it's done, they're looking who the next president is going to be, because for them, Mr. Trump is over.
Yeah.
And we all may worry, my God, what may that man do in the next 3 years? But they don't. They know what he was sent there to do. He has now done it. There will be an agreement between the House and the Senate, and that bill will be packaged up, and it will give them more or less what they want. Now, one last thing about that before I go to the streets.
Yeah.
When Mr. Trump came to office the first time, part of his appeal was he said what the conventional leaders of the Republican and Democratic Party never talk about. Right. That the United States is becoming a fundamentally more unequal society with each passing day. And that's been going on for the 40 years because that's what a redistribution of wealth, that's what it means. You're taking wealth away from the poor, you're taking it away from the middle, and you're creating the Jeffrey Bezos of the world who take over Venice for their marriage because that's the world they live in, right? Most Americans can't get to Venice to look at it, and he owns it for a week of festivities, and he arrives in his $500 million yacht, right? You and I make jokes about it because it's like talking about the moon. That's unrelated we are. So you're creating gross inequality. That inequality, which helped Mr. Trump get into office because people are upset about it, he made it worse. His tax cut worsened the inequality. Then, because he's a smart politician, he turned around, used the fact that inequality had gotten worse, blamed it on Biden, who, by the way, also made it worse, but he didn't do it anywhere near as bad as Trump had done. He didn't pass a tax cut, anything like that. So, but it was clever. So people are still upset because inequality is still worse. He gets himself into office a second time. And now this big, beautiful bill will make it worse again. You know what we are watching? And if I can get this across to your audience it's the best thing I can do. We are caught up now in an economy that is spinning out of control. The rich who sit at the top have no limits. When one of them, like Warren Buffett, says, "Hey, we're not paying enough taxes. We're going to become so rich, and the rest of the people are going to become so poor that they are going to do what your previous guest told us about that crowd outside the White House on Mr. Nixon's last day." We're going to hear more and more of those stories. You're going to have them on your program. You're going to comment because you have a wonderful sense of humor and you're going to play with it, which you should. Laughing at it is the only way to stop from crying about
I
it.
know.
But in the long run, we're going to do both. We'll laugh when we can, and then, when you can't get medical care for your mother when she needs it, when you can't get a job, when you've gone to school and spent all that money, borrowed up the wazoo so you can get a degree, and it doesn't get you the job you had dreamed and hoped for. Now you're stuck with a debt you can't cover. I mean, we're talking about the experience of millions and millions of Americans that's getting worse with each day.
Yeah.
And a society that's spinning out of control that way, well, that takes me to something you and I have discussed, which is we are living through the dying of an empire. And these kinds of things are what happen when empires die. Now, in the streets, in order for the people to go into the streets, there has to be the perception on the part of the people who are very smart, who see this. I'm talking to you from Manhattan, New York. I recently went to the polls and voted for a man named Zoran Mamdani, as did most Americans who voted in the Democratic primary, right? I did that. Why? Because he's a socialist. And that is already so important to get people's heads to start thinking that I would have voted for him even if I didn't admire many of his particular programs, which I do. So this was an easy choice for me, as it was for a million other New Yorkers like me. We defeated the former governor of this state by a lot. And this is a politician who nobody barely knew 6 months ago. So this tells you this is a country on edge. But for people to go into the streets tomorrow, they have to have a sense that it can make a difference. And in order to give them that sense, there have to be people who organize that, who say, look, we are the committee for, it doesn't matter, we're a group of people. Here we are, here's our names, here's what we do. We're like you. We're gathering folks together to be in front of the mayor's office on Thursday at 3:00, whatever it is. Then people will come. And they will fill the streets because they have a sense that they're part of something. Now, sometimes it happens, and we use this word usually mistakenly, spontaneously, very rarely. Spontaneous usually means that you don't know who organized it. So you think it kind of happened. I'm willing to bet you there were people in the weeks before they gathered at the White House, the way your previous guest just described to us, who helped who said through a whole lot of networks of organizations, we're going to be in front of the White House at this time on that day, right? Joined us. And another group said, yeah, we're going to go too. And so they came. Now, if we had a real democracy, which we have not had in my memory, and I was born in the United States, if we had a democracy, the Democratic Party would have been out there organizing peaceful protest in the streets to show that the people don't want this. Just like we showed Mr. Nixon, bye-bye, we don't want you no more. Okay? But the Democratic Party is Republicans light. It's the same thing. They're not going to do it. they're going to sit in Washington and they're going to attach a little limit here, a little limit there, and then run a campaign saying, vote for us. We're not as bad as them. This is childish. We have no organizations. I shouldn't be that harsh. Our organizations are few, far between, and weak. And that's a terrible problem. We've got to fix that. No one else is going to do it for us. We've got to create the organizations, work together to be a real opposition, and then we can go in the streets and we can make an enormous difference, no question at all. Part of the reason they keep doing what they're doing, making the inequality of this society ever worse, is because they have no opposition.
Yes. I hate to quibble with you, but your senator in New York, Chuck Schumer, was very pleased with himself that he got them to change the name from Big Beautiful Bill. That's not sufficient for you.
No, really,
no.
I'm glad you mentioned it. I'm glad you see the humor in it, because you're right.
As you said, if you don't laugh at it, because it seems so, it's mind-blowingly grotesque. And what ends up happening is you get, let's say, like George Bush passes his tax cut. When Obama comes in, he doesn't do anything different. No. Meaning you get the situation where it inexorably moves in one direction, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. Donald Trump, on top of passing his tax cut, is enshrining his other tax cut into law.
Right.
So the person
perpetuate it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But there's something worse with Mr. Schumer. I mean, it's beyond word. One of the things that Trump does is what every great tax cut for corporations and the rich always does. In order to get that passed, they put with it a teeny little tax cut for average people, in order to fool the public into thinking, oh, I'm getting a tax cut alongside the rich and the corporations. No, they're getting an enormous hamburger, and you're getting a small crumb off a corner of the hamburger bun. Now, if you're happy with that, okay, but then you're an idiot. It's really an insult. Well, what did they do this time? This time they said, we're letting tip income be free of taxes. They added this. Yeah.
No tax on tips.
But if you read the law, what they passed here, first there's a limit. You can't do that for more than $25,000 a year. Well, if you talk to most waiters and waitresses, that's already what that's what they. I mean, it gives them nothing. You put a cap. Is there a cap on rich people? No. There's a cap on the tip. Who invented this behavior? Now, it's also the case, and here's where people like you are important, Jamal. The public doesn't know most of this. The mass media, who are owned and operated by the same people who are donating to these political parties, they don't explain to people what I'm explaining to you now. I've developed a fairly large audience around the world for what I do. And I've wondered to myself, right? How come? Why? I'm not saying stuff so different today from what I said 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. I've been a professor of economics all my life. My tune hasn't changed, but suddenly I have an audience. Well, the good news is that means that the public, they kind of want to hear what I'm saying. They know somewhere that there's something to this, and they're not getting it except from people like me. Not only me, but from people like me, and from programs like yours that are willing to talk about this stuff. It makes you, I don't want to give you a big swelled head now, but it makes you it really does make you a very important phenomena. Programs like yours are among the few where this can be spoken about. Otherwise, you're lost in the details and the weeds, Every story I read in the mass media, almost all of them are full of information that isn't important and are
Right.
lacking the information that is. So partly you want to blame people for not going in the streets, but they don't have the information, which, if they had it, would bring many more of them into the streets than we see now.
I'm curious on something else. There was, I don't remember who said this, so I can't really ascribe who pointed it out, but I think that what they were saying is true. For somebody like Mandani had in one of his speeches made this argument of saying he was talking, and he says we must get our hands on the means of production. Now, when I hear that, I'm like, yes, good job, good job, right? By the same token, he had this big smile on his face when he said it, effectively like, yeah, all of this is nice. We need to get more people elected. We need to get more socialists elected. We need to get more people who are politically minded into the political process, who care about these items. They're not just there as a figurehead. They actually are trying to get things accomplished. But whether it's him or whether it's somebody like Sanders, who more like a Democrat, FDR type Democrat, not really a socialist, I wouldn't call. They made this point of saying, inevitably, you get to the point where you have to make a choice about getting your hands on the system itself. And, when Donald Trump, and I'll use him as an example, when Donald Trump initially got in office, he passed the tariffs thing. The economy freaked out. The market was dropping, I think, 1,000 points every day. The dollar dropped in value, I think like 10, 12% over the course of 6 months or so. And even now, or at the time, the bond market was the thing that even made Trump, who doesn't really care, seemingly. Like Trump sleeps fine. He's the only president that hasn't aged because he doesn't really care. Even the bond market was able to get Trump to bend the knee and back away. And they even point out, they said, when the bond market started flipping out, the faith and credit of the US government was at risk. Trump understood it was at risk, in which case he backed away from the hot stove. Meaning, if somebody like Trump is willing to back away from the hot stove, rando Democrat, rando socialists will also. I guess what I'm asking is, isn't there a point where if you're trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, that you run up with hard limits of a system itself that doesn't believe in those things? Like, people act like they're like a fish in water. They don't realize that it's a capitalistic system. It's not anything that you want it to be. It's built. It's in the bricks. Don't they have to, how do you get around that? Or is there even a way to get around it? Or is it so in the bricks that you're stuck with running up against those hard limits if you are indeed trying to get your hands on the means of production as a socialist or as a democratic socialist?
It's the $64,000 question, but I got good news for you. I know the answer, and so does everybody else. People are just afraid to say it. You've already just done it, and Zoran Mamdani has to do it. Whether he does it as humor, as an aside, whether he's quiet about, you have to eventually, for example, you have to have your own mass media. You cannot continue to be enslaved by a mass media. You can't do it. I'm sorry about this.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You are fine.
You have to have your own organs. If you look at the growth of any left-wing or socialist movement in the history of the world, they eventually had to have their own newspaper, their own radio station, their own television station. They had to be able to communicate. Now, the internet allows us with social media to get halfway there. The internet is a very powerful weapon, not just for the system to control us, it's used for that, but for us to mobilize against it. And we are using it as we are in this very moment that I'm speaking to you, and that we can project this out. But here's the bigger one. We have to come up with a strategy for how our movement, a movement of people for a different economic system, can begin to accumulate the means of production, the very way that goods and services are produced and distributed in a society. Because we're not going to have followers if they can't put their shirt on in the morning, and if they haven't got food on the table and a shelter for them to sleep under. And how are we going to do that? And the answer is, in my judgment, what is called the cooperative movement. We have got to understand that already out there across America and even more around the world, there are people who have gotten together to organize production in a different way. No small group of people at the top who own the business. No, 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 no. The businesses will be owned collectively by all the workers who come there to do the job, whether it's making a software program or cooking a meal or running a school, it doesn't matter. One person, one vote. We bring democracy to the workplace. The minute we do that, Jamar, we have taken away from the people at the top the ownership of the enterprise, and therefore they draw into their hands the profits and they use them to buy the politicians. That's right. If we substitute a cooperative organization of the workplace for what we have now, we take away from them the profits because those will be earned by us collectively, and we will be deciding together what we want to do with the profits. There won't be a tiny proportion of us sitting at the top using the profits we all work to help produce to take care of them, to let them become rich, that's the mistake. We have accepted that somehow the world has to be organized with a few people at the top of every business, of every factory, every store, every office. Why? 3 centuries ago, we said we're not going to be governed by a king and his son or daughter who's the queen. What? We're not going to allow that. We separated a lot of them. We separated the heads of a lot of them from the rest of their bodies, if you remember. And we said, no more you. And now England has one because every few years they need to have a parade in London to pretend that they have a king who they give a crap about. They don't. We don't have one. If we got rid of the king, here's the way I teach it my students. The kings were clever. They realized that we wouldn't allow them anymore. So they changed their name and they hid. They changed their name. We're not kings anymore. Our new name is CEO. Right inside the company, and there we're going to be the king. We sit in an office. We have a special office. Looks a little like a throne. And we have the power to take the job, give you the job, not give you the job, raise your salary, lower your salary, move to China, not move to. We make all the decisions. You all have to live with them, just like a king. What are we doing? This is a country that gives lip service to democracy, and in the workplace, we don't have any, and we sit there like bumps on a log, allowing this to continue. Mr. Trump is a symptom of that system. You don't want Mr. Trump? You better change the system, because after Mr. Trump, there's another Mr. Trump waiting. You know it, and I know it.
Professor Richard Wolff, you always have my deepest appreciation for joining me. Honest to God. Professor Wolff.
Tomorrow, let me say it because I know it embarrasses you, but you have the appreciation of me and a lot of other people because you put this stuff out there for people to think about.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Honestly, it does. Right. You have a good one, all right? Thank you for this.
Thank you. Until the next time.
Have a good one. All right, and just for the audience would know, Professor Richard Wolff, he is Professor of Economic Emeritus, University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and a visiting professor at the graduate program in International Affairs for the New School University, New York City. He is founder of Democracy at Work and host of the nationally syndicated show, Economic Update, fantastic show, by the way. His latest book, The System is the Sickness, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself, is available with his other books, Understanding Socialism, Understanding Marxism, at democracyatwork.info. And of course, he's also on Twitter at